Hello and welcome to another special work in progress episode here at Captain's Dry Dock. And in this episode today, we're building the abdomen of the First Order Stormtrooper Armour. Let's make it real. By now, you know that I look at a load of work in progresses online, so it helps me get informed of how to build my Stormtrooper armour. And I can safely say that the vast majority of manufacturers of First Order Stormtrooper armour produce it in the same sort of way. And I don't mean just vac forming, but also the way it comes together, how to trim it as well. Point in question. As we're working on the midsection, generally they come together in the same sort of way. You have the front section, you have the back section, and those two come together and get glued on the sides. The only thing I should note is that the back section is usually scored right down the middle and made into two parts because you want some adjustment, because it's not always going to fit everyone. You may want to make it bigger or tighter later. So I'm going to cut this in two and then glue this as two separate pieces. So all in all, it's three parts that are going to be glued together. There's the front, and this is how it marries. There we go, just like a jigsaw puzzle, so I know which is left and which is right. And then the usual cutting, and I'm just going to use a Stanley knife. I'm not going to be too careful with this. And then it's just a case of fatiguing the plastic. Before I glue, I want to go into a little bit more detail of what I'm actually doing. So this particular manufacturer made this lovely indent here. So there's a nice overlap when I place the front part over the back part. And there's a reason for that, because this is meant to be seamless. So there's going to be some filling involved afterwards, but hopefully not too much. But the glue I'm going to be using for this is not E6000, but I'm definitely going to be using 2-part epoxy resin because I want this to be really, really firm. There's going to be a lot of movement in this, and the only thing I want flexing is the back part when I get in and out, but not the sides, because if it flexes too much, even with the flexible filler that I have, it will actually crack. So I want to make sure that this is nice and firm, and I plan to actually add braces on the inside, which I'll show later. While this is setting, let's talk about clamps. They're super important throughout this entire build because of the size of it. Now, we're all familiar with these types of clamps. They're very cheap and robust, but they're only really good for the edges. What do you do when you need to make sure two pieces of material need to meet together in the middle, which is way away from the edge? Powerful magnets. Now, these are some of the most powerful magnets you're ever going to get hold of, and you shouldn't get anything more powerful than this. These are great because there's some on this side and there's some on that side, making sure that the two pieces of material that are overlapping are really firm together with the glue in between. Now, be warned, they are so strong that it took all my force just to pry these apart. As you can see, these two here just snapped together, and I just thought, I'm not even going to bother just removing them. I'm going to leave that until it sets. But yeah, magnets are super important. Yeah, it's come out really, really well, and really fast as well. The 2-part epoxy resin cured within 5 minutes. It's still a little bit soft, but 24 hours later, this will be as hard as nails. And so that seam is not going to break anytime soon. Now, the next thing I need to do is this step. So if you look carefully there, I need to make that disappear. And to do so, you know the next step, filler. It's a bit messy, isn't it? But now that it's cured, 80 grit sandpaper to smooth it out. Before and afterwards. Although it's looking and feeling really smooth, I need to add some primer just around this area just to see if there's any other imperfections. But before I do, I need to clean the surface. Oh, at this stage, I'm not going to primer the entire thing, just localize where the seam is, because all I want to do is just try and find out if there's any imperfections that need to be filled, painted and repeated again until it's perfect. And here is the result. Now, I've not done enough coats to completely cover up the green. However, it's just enough so I can see the imperfections like you can see here, which was not visible before I painted. And now it's just repeating again. Fill, paint and repeat. Okay, so now it's all ready for the procedure. Come on, you know what it is. You've been watching long enough. Clean the surface. Apply the white primer. Wait 24 hours for it to harden and then sand with 1200 wet and dry. And then add 3 layers of gloss white. No, this isn't part of the whole Stormtrooper armour. This is in fact a practical thing I had to get for myself when spraying a confined area with this stuff, because there's still particles in the air which haven't been extracted by the extractor yet, and sometimes it gets stuck onto your skin. It's not particularly nice, and so I got myself one of these. It's relatively cheap and it's quite useful. God knows what the neighbours must think, seeing a grown guy with all this get up, getting into a confined area which is a tent on his balcony. They must think I have a meth lab. Now the first layer has been put in there, I want to show you this. The humble hairdryer. Not for me, but actually this helps speed up the process of paint to dry. And so all I'm going to do is switch it on, stand it up inside the tent and close it up like an oven. And then that will fill the tent with a nice warm air and make that paint dry faster. My only tip is to make sure that you don't have it pointing directly towards the item, just in case it picks up any dirt or dust and flings it on your lovely paint work. So the trickiest part of this section are the boxes. Now these are the external boxes that go on front of the armour, and you have to cut those precisely. As you can see over my shoulder, I've been referring to a work in progress of how they've done it and what it looks like afterwards. And as you can see here, there's an indent and it follows a contour. I tell you what, it's better for me to show you. Now if you want to look down, misses. There is where it should be, and I know that because the manufacturer was kind enough to indent the number location. So 5, 5, so that goes there, and as you can see there's a contour where it has a bump, and that's what that follows there. So what I'm going to do now is cut along, but not too close to the indent, so it gives me some leeway to make some error and just cut closer and closer and closer until it fits perfectly. And before you actually say, oh, you can use filler, no, I actually found out recently these should not be stuck on. They're meant to have a seam to them, as if they should come off. Not that they are going to come off, but they shouldn't look like there's part of the armour. So they need to be bolted on, which I'll show later. So it's really important that it's a really nice snug fit, leaving a nice seam, but not too much that it's a massive gap. So here's a tip for you. When you start cutting out these boxes, you also cut away the flashing, and on that flashing is the corresponding number for each of these boxes. And when it gets thrown away, you don't know what's what. So here's a little tip. Grab yourself a Sharpie and mark them off. And then now I know what box goes where on the front of the armour. Sand. Yes, so the material is super shiny, so it's not great for paint to stick onto. So it looks like this currently. And that's no good because the paint needs something to bite into. Hence the fact I'm using 200 wet and dry paper and just roughing up the surface. So after a couple of minutes, it should look like this, which means the surface is slightly rougher and the paint can bite into that material, which means later on, it's not going to easily peel off or flake off. To locate these little boxes where they should be, I'm going to secure them with some nylon bolts using 2-part epoxy resin. It's really straightforward. Just coat the end of it with the 2-part epoxy resin, and then I'm just going to plonk it right inside the box. And I'm going to add 2 because the last thing we want is that these things start rotating as you start walking around at a Comic Con or a convention. I need to add some holes in these location points so these bolts go all the way through, which is kind of tricky because, as you can see, it's very hard to mark off and know exactly where this sits flush with the entire armour. So what I tend to do is just align it to the side here so I know at what level they should be at, and because they are in the middle, I just mark off the middle here, using this horizontal to give me a rough idea where the hole should be. Then it's a case of making 2 pilot holes. And the reason why it's important to do pilot holes is because if I use this size drill bit, it will take longer and it will probably go all over the place when I'm trying to drill into this flat part of the plastic. Now this should be a lot more easier. Now to fit the box. Just feed through the bolts. There we are. Now that is a fantastic fit. Now to do the rest of them. So with all strap-ons, misses, you need to add some location points for the actual webbing. So there's 2 loopholes on the front and 4 loopholes on the back. However, as I started cutting into the plastic, I realised there's going to be a lot of wear and tear movement, which means there's a chance of failure for each loophole where cracks can appear. So I need to start strengthening those by adding brackets behind them. But all these brackets are just pieces of plastic, the same plastic that's been cut out in the shape of a rectangle, and they're going to be stuck behind each loophole. However, there's a slight issue. They're flat, whereas the armour, so this needs to be heated up and so it can form and actually mimic the curvature of the armour so I can stick it easily behind each loophole. And to do that, I need to use one of these, a hot air gun. To help me curve the plastic around a curved surface, I need something that's heat resistant, which I'm going to use this glass jar for. And there's the hot air gun, and I'm going to be a little bit low tech and use some oven gloves so I can actually help form this without burning my own hand. Now that I've got it more or less together, I need to work out how the thing's going to hang off me. So this is what I'm going to do. And there we have it. This is my system. Well, it's not quite finished. All it is just 2 bits of black 5cm wide webbing that goes from the front and attaches through loopholes that I've cut into my armour all the way over my shoulders and crisscrosses over at the back. And where it crisscrosses, that's where I plan to stitch it to hold its form, and then it feeds into 2 other loopholes as well. Now, many people may ask, is there a right or wrong way of harnessing it all together? And to be fair, there isn't. Every stormtrooper does it slightly differently. Now, I've seen troopers do it like this, and I prefer this system. It's simple, it's just 2 bits of material with a few buckles, or you can go full hog for accuracy and do it like the movie versions, where they use this complex, elaborate style of mesh and webbing which goes all the way inside the armour and then goes over the shoulders, which is fine, but I just need it to hang off my shoulders as I walk around, and this is the method that I prefer. I'm going to start on the first part of the webbing being the front, where the 2 front loopholes are. Already I've just started on this part, this section, where you've got the female buckle here, and if I just take it out you can see how it's threaded through. Give you a close look how it's made. It's really simple. So there's the buckle, there's the 50mm webbing that goes all the way in and back out, and then it's double stitched, just very simple stitching, and that's why you can see my trusty sewing machine in the background. And then this bit here will go all the way back into the armour like you already saw, and then attach there. Now I'm not going to sew this bit whatsoever because it's going to be a bit of a nightmare to get this and try and get that sewn under there without knocking things, and it's going to be very awkward. So I'm going to use an engineering solution and use end caps. So they're just basically closed versions of metal rivets, and they're just going to be popped on there while that's on this armour. And as you can see how it works on the side profile, there we go, the 2 loops. Very simple. The other important thing to know about webbing is this. Yes, it phrase. I've mentioned it before in other videos, and this is where you need to get yourself one of these. So if you're pyromaniac, you'll love this. Just hit it with a little bit of heat, and what that does, because it's synthetic, it's melted the very end. In fact, they call it sealing. So that is not going to fray now. This is an end cap. It's essentially, as I mentioned before, a rivet for clothing. And these are in two parts. So you've got this bit and this bit. There we go. And they come together either side of the cloth. And then you get one of these and you crush them together and then it makes the rivet. Now what I need to do is be able to make a hole for those through this webbing. Now this is synthetic, which means it's actually going to be quite easy to make a hole. So not with a hole cutter, because if you use a soldering iron, not only will it make a hole, but it will also seal the fabric as well. So I'm just going to put one right here all the way through, and then one right here. Just mind my fingers because it's very, very hot. All the way through there. So now I've got two holes ready to receive those end caps. So I didn't actually get to film me putting these rivets in, but you generally know how they work. So there we go, there's one side and there's the other, and they get crushed together and then that's fastened. And that's more than enough to actually make sure that this holds the entire abdomen over my shoulders. Ta-da! Yep, they are done. So those are fastened and they are ready to wear. Well, not quite, because I need to do the back. So I've already done one here. You can see how it's attached using an adjuster. So there's no studs, there's no stitching. In fact, this is really easy and straightforward to do. And I'll show you how I weave all this together. And as you can imagine, this goes straight over my shoulder like so. And I need to add the male buckle. This is the part I need for the back. Now, this is very familiar. It's an adjuster you would have seen on most bags, and I'm going to use this for that. So first off, I'm going to feed it through here on the first hole, and then go back through the second hole. It's quite difficult to see because everything's all in black, but you get what's happening here. There we go. So it's looped in and back out, and I just feed it through and just give myself enough slack, because then I feed this through the loophole here, and then I go back round and go back through the same hole and then back in like so. And there we go. And now that is really secure. Now this is what you call a buckle. Look how chunky that is. There's a back and there's a front to it. And as you can see, we are going to thread that webbing from the back that we've been dealing with. And this is the front part, the naked part, ready to actually thread through this chunky buckle. So it goes through the bottom hole and then back through, loops over to the top hole. And there we have it. And I'll show you the side view. That's what it looks like. You can see what's happening there. Goes all the way through the bottom hole, loops back to the back hole, and then pull it. And there we go. So that is firm and ready to wear. And there we go, just show you it all clips together. Now that's a beautiful sound. That's the sound of a completed webbing. I've now positioned the boxes in their relevant positions using the bolts. Now to fasten them in, using a washer and the corresponding nut. Just a note, I need to make sure I don't do this too tight because it will end up distorting the box as well as risking breaking the bolt off. It doesn't need to be that tight at all. Once I've got it firm enough, I need to shorten this because this is sticking out. You don't want that inside your belly. Now that's done, I've got 14 bolts left. So we're finally at the final stretch of finishing this part of the armour, which has been a long process, because the next stage is to make sure that these two bits at the back come together and stay together using webbing and Velcro. I've gone ahead and already done the top strap here, and I'm going to show you how I done that by completing the bottom one. So to actually make this strap, it's quite easy. It's just the same 50mm wide webbing used for the shoulder harness, but it's got two bits of Velcro sewn on. And it's important to note it's the hook side, the rough hook side, and not the fluffy loop side, and there's a good reason for that. Where that fluffy loop side is actually on the armour itself. So I've got one here which is stuck directly onto the armour externally, and there's another one on the other side of the armour as well. And the reason why that I chose to actually make sure that's the fluffy bit and not the hook bit, as you can imagine, let's just say it misaligned on the interior, that would be rubbing up against my back. And even if I'm wearing an undergarment, that's going to start really grating at that fabric and making it well, destroy it essentially. And how that works is that I stick this inside, in the inside part of the Velcro, and then feed through the second Velcro part, and that comes round, and then there we go, stuck directly onto that Velcro, and that's completely adjustable. So let's just say I put on a little bit of weight, and during COVID times you can imagine that because of lockdown, and as I expand I can do this. So this is completely adjustable to my torso as I get older and probably a little bit fatter. The nature of being a stormtrooper is the fact that it's a uniform, meaning that every single stormtrooper has got to look the same, and that's if the look you're going for, which means there's very little opportunity for you to inject your own creativity. However, you can adapt your kit and your armour to the way it suits you in regards to the way it comes together and also the comfort. So I'm doing two things. The first thing, I'm going to add some padding on the inside, some mesh material, which will do a number of things there. It will be, number one, comfortable, especially when you've got the plastic rubbing up against you, and also it will be cool in the summer and warm in the winter. But I'll do a completely different episode on that because I'm still trying to master it and make sure I've done the patterns right. The second thing I'm going to do is add this stuff here, because one thing I realised when I actually had my New Hope armour is the amount of noise plastic makes when it's grinding against each other, banging against each other like so. And so what I want to do is also add some of this stuff here. What this is a door protector. You use it on the edge of cars and also around about the house, and it does one or two things as well. So it will stop that noise of plastic grinding against each other and banging against each other at the edges, and also it looks professional because, as I mentioned before on this work in progress, I want my armour to look like as if a real stormtrooper opened it up, and that's what they saw. And the last thing I wanted a stormtrooper to see was these edges here that look very plasticky. But once I had this on, especially on the bits that can't be seen on the outside, because again, I want to make sure it's uniform and looks like every other stormtrooper armour, that it's going to be comfortable and it's going to look cool. This is how you install it. It's really straightforward. So open it up a little bit. Now I'm going to use friction for it to hold in place. Now if I want to, I can add a little bit of glue. I would probably use E6000 just to make sure it stays in place. It's not going to shift around, especially when you're moving around quite a lot. And what you can see is that it goes on really, really easily. And all I have to do is trim it at the end with a pair of scissors. And look at that. Now that is neat and it looks professional, rather than just having a bare edge. So what do you think? I love this finishing touch. It was cheap, it was easy, and it's got a practical purpose as well. And yes, I know it's not Canon, but it's going to be hidden by the thermal detonator. Just like that. I can almost see the finishing line because now I've got to apply the vinyl stickers. Now there's two that I need to put on this piece of armour. So there's this one here, the square, and that goes here, and this one goes there. It's all pretty straightforward. There's self-adhesive. So if I just take this off, place it in the square. Now it doesn't matter if I get it misaligned because I can actually peel this off and put that back on again. And we're done. I am super happy of how this turned out, especially now that I'm wearing it. It's given me a taste of what it's going to be like when I finish my first order Stormtrooper kit and get to put it all on. And already it's feeling really, really good. Now, like all makers, there's certain aspects about this piece that I could have done better, but that's the great thing about this hobby, because once you make it, it's not the be all end all. You can always go back and improve things, replace things, or just make them better. So there's certain aspects about this, perhaps a few gaps here, there and everywhere, and also certain parts of the paint where it wasn't smooth enough, but it does a job and it looks the part. Now to give you an overview of all this. So let's start with the front. We've got the boxes going from one hip all the way around to the other hip, and two of those boxes have got black vinyl decals stuck on. So we've got one on the front, which is the big box, and we've got one on the side with the box with the indent. While we're on the front, we've got the two loopholes that are cut into the panel to cater for the 50mm black webbing that loops through and connects to these really big chunky industrial sized buckles. Now I know there's a few experienced troopers probably watching this, Probably noting that I've either got this armor too low on my body or too high. But that's a great thing about these buckles because they're adjustable. All I need to do to bring it up is grab onto the tab, pull it, and it raises the entire armor higher on my body. And if I want to make it lower, I just pull on these buckles. So let's go to the side. Don't worry, there's no BO yet. So I've seen a lot of work in progresses online where makers would actually cut an indent here to make it more comfortable for them when they have their arms down like so, to stop it from chasing. And also the webbing of the clothes sometimes gets a bit too restrictive as they try and put up their arms. I've not done it on my armor, but as I wear this, I may incorporate this on it if it doesn't impact the overall look. The other thing I need to know when it comes to the side part of the armour, if there is a failure on this, it would be here where the seams are on either side. So right there was the seam, which has been glued and filled. So if there's going to be any cracking, it's going to be there. Hence the fact I made sure I used 2-part epoxy resin and braced it from behind with other pieces of plastic, so it doesn't give too much. And then you have the back. There's a lot going on in here. So what you see there, most of this is going to be covered up by the thermal detonator, but let's go over it. So we've got the 2 pieces of 50mm black webbing, which go from the inside, Velcro from the inside, all the way back through the loopholes and attach on the other side. Speaking about the thermal detonator, there's that indent at the top to make sure it's located correctly right in the middle, because if I didn't have that, it will go from left to right. So if I'm on my own dressing up, I can just pop this on and know exactly where it is. And also as I walk around, it's not going to shift too much. So I really hope you enjoyed this build. It was a really long one. Sorry, I like to keep the videos as short as I can, but there was a lot going on in here in regards to webbing and making sure everything comes together correctly and securely. But if you want to see other videos like this, I've already done a load of parts of this Stormtrooper kit. Go down below to click on the links or go to my playlist and you can see from when I bought the entire kit all the way up until this stage. The next episode, I'll be working on the belt because there are other parts that attach to this part of the armor, which will be the codpiece, the rear end and the belt, which I'll cover in the next couple episodes. So if you enjoyed this and you want to see more and eventually the entire kit completed, click on the subscribe button down below, and if you are subscribed, thank you again for watching, and you take care, and I'll see you next time.